all these four dimensions of vulnerability. Some country has one, some countries have two, some countries will have three, but there's no country in the world that I know of which has these four vulnerabilities operating simultaneously. And therefore, if there is one country which should be worried about climate change with a sense of urgency, without getting into these ideological battles that we have got trapped into, it is India. So that was the first challenge that I had to face, and I think Dr. Swaminathan will recall the amount of time I've had to get up in Parliament and explain to my colleagues in Parliament why we should be proactive in the area of climate change. It is because of these points of vulnerability. Now, the second thing that we have done is, having recognized this vulnerability, we must be in a position to assess what the impact of climate change is going to be on livelihoods, on our various ecosystems. Last year, we established the Indian Network on Comprehensive Climate Change Assessment, INCA. This is a network of 128 research institutions spread across the country, 250 of the best scientists that we can mobilize, and we gave them a work program, and the mandate was for this network to come up with periodic assessments of the impact of climate change in different sectors and in different regions of the economy. I'm glad to say that last May, that is in May 2010, the first report of the network was released. This was on an emissions inventory for the year 2007. What are the greenhouse gas emissions from India for the year 2007? Before I joined, I discovered that the latest year for which we have greenhouse gas emissions data is 1994. We are in 2010 and we have the baseline data for the year 1994. Simply an unacceptable proposition as far as we are concerned. So we have updated our emissions inventory, and this is all available on our website. This was released on May. It's a public document, and it gives you a reasonable assessment of where we are as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned. We are the fourth largest emitter in the world, accounting for about 5% of world greenhouse gas emissions. The gap between the top two and India, very, very large. China is number one at about 23%. The United States is number two at about 21%. The European Union is number three at about 12 to 13%. And India and Russia broadly on par with each other at about 5%. Now, on Tuesday, that is on the 16th of November, we will be releasing the second report of this network, and this report is directly relevant to what you're discussing today. It will be the first 4x4 assessment of the impact of climate change. 4 sectors: the impact of climate change on agriculture, on health, on water, and on forests, and the impact on 4 regions of the economy, because as Dr. Swaminathan so very beautifully put it, it's not just common and differentiated responsibility, but we should talk about common and differentiated impacts also. So we're looking at 4 regions of India: the Himalayan ecosystem, the Western Ghats, the coastal zone, and the Northeast. The Northeast is very important because about 25% of our forest area is concentrated in that region, and that is a region of great biodiversity which will be affected by climate change. So this 4x4 assessment we have done. We are going to be releasing this on Tuesday. But the important thing of this assessment is that it is for the year 2030. It's very important. I want to stress this because all assessments of climate change are for the year 2060 or 2070 when none of us will be around. So that's why we are safe when we make all these projections. I told these guys, you have to make studies and assessments for periods in which you will be alive to be held accountable. And that's why we're bringing it out. We're going to be releasing it. Dr. Swaminathan will be present. For the year 2030, what is the assessment of Indian scientists in these 4 sectors of the economy and in 4 regions of the country? So that would be the second exercise at trying to raise consciousness and awareness of our people that look, this is where the impact is going to be, this is the magnitude of the impact. The third activity is really what you have embarked on, is what do you do about this? After having assessed the vulnerability, after having assessed what the impact is going to be, what are the interventions? What do you need to do in agriculture, in water, in different sectors of the economy? So that is very important, and I think that is really where we need to build close partnerships between the government and civil society organizations, because frankly, this has to be a two-way process. It cannot be a top-down process where governments decide what needs to be done and we issue diktats, and we know that diktats never really function on the ground very effectively. So this has to be, in my view, adaptation to climate change has to be a community-driven process. Adaptation to climate change cannot be a government-mandated process. It has to be a community-driven process. Elected panchayats, women's self-help groups, various social organizations have to be involved. I have started a parallel exercise about involving the women's self-help groups, particularly in states like Kerala, Andhra, where they have a very strong network, using them as vehicles for getting ideas on how adaptation to climate change will take place, how people perceive their lives that need to be adapted to the impacts of climate change, and how governments can help in this process. So I don't want to belabor this point, but I do feel that exercises that of the type that Dr. Swaminathan has initiated are very, very important. The booklet that I have just released today is very significant. The management of agro-biodiversity, a number of initiatives that have been identified here are all things that needs to be done at the community level, with of course great support and backing by both the state as well as the central government. I want to reassure you that as far as the Ministry of Environment and Forests is concerned, we will work with various civil society organizations. We are not going to work only with scientists. We are not only going to work with state governments, but we'll also work with civil society organizations so that we are in a better position to come up with solutions which will ultimately get reflected on the ground. We have a National Action Plan on Climate Change, which I'm sure many of you have seen. Many states now are in the process of putting together state-level action plans. Odisha, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, many states, Himachal Pradesh, many states are in the process of putting together their action plans. And I think in this process, feedback and the involvement of local communities, civil society groups is going to be very essential. So let me end by saying that we are faced with a very serious challenge of climate change. We must have a response, not because the world community is telling us to do so, but it is in our interest to do so. Unfortunately, our approach to climate change has been unduly influenced by international negotiations. We need to de-link what we do from international negotiations. We need to ask ourselves the question, what is in our interest, and mount the appropriate response. What we negotiate and how we negotiate for international commitments is an entirely separate issue. But what we do domestically is far more significant and far more important. And it is to that domestic agenda of climate change that I think we need to pay greater attention. And I'm sure with the leadership of people like Dr. Swaminathan, who remains an inspiration to all of us, we will, in the next couple of years, be able to show a far greater degree of success in terms of a response to climate change, both in terms of adaptation as well as mitigation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for spelling out key concerns and the government's priorities in such a lucid manner and in such great depth. I think particularly encouraging for this audience would be your belief that adaptation to climate change has to be a community-driven process, and it's something that all of us would, I'm sure, be extremely willing to contribute to in the coming years. We've come to the end of the inaugural session, and I would therefore like to, without spending too much time, underline the significance of what's already been said, and would like to thank our distinguished speakers at the dais and thank all of you once again for having joined us this morning. Tea will be served outside. We'll break for 30 minutes and hope to be back here at 5 minutes, to start here at 5 minutes past 11 o'clock. So if I could request you to please be seated at 11. Thank you very much.